In mythology, Neptune is the god of the ocean and its great fertile waters, able to give life to strange and otherworldly creatures. But what happens when the ecosystem changes, the waters warm and conditions shift? New forms will emerge, new mutations appear, and new fantasies begin to take shape. Join me on a journey to explore the past transits of Neptune, how these transits shape what we idolize as a collective, and what they can tell us about what we should expect as Neptune is about to change signs for the first time in 14 years.
In the watery depths of the ocean dwelt Neptune, god of the sea.
Neptune, as an astrological symbol, is ultimately concerned with unity. And because unity dissolves a sense of separateness, Neptune governs over empathy and compassion. And the idea of unification dissolves definition, much like the boundary softening and illusory effects of drugs and alcohol, which are therefore also associated with Neptune. Neptune topics draw us beyond ordinary reality. Art and music, film and television, spirituality. At the same time, Neptune is a diffusing influence. Strong Neptune contacts heighten sensitivity, which at one extreme can manifest as mysticism or psychic receptivity, and at the other as overwhelm, guilt, or a sense of victimhood. Neptune spends about 14 years in one sign, and for that whole stretch, the motives of that sign dominate the public imagination, and we become more attuned to that sign's influence. For the past 14 years, Neptune's been transiting the sign of Pisces, an environment of extreme fluidity and overwhelm and sometimes delusion, but also sensitivity and compassion. But on January 26th, 2026, the Neptune and Pisces era comes to a close, as Neptune will be ingressing into Aries, the sign of the willful ram, which is going to usher in a completely new experience of what inspires the collective. So the trance that Neptune induces is changing from one of introspection to one of autonomy. I've been examining different eras of Neptune's transits to understand how they have influenced society and to gain a clearer sense of what the future might look like in our new era of Neptune in a fire sign. For example, take Neptune's transit through Sagittarius. The Vietnam War, the Watergate scandal, economic instability, people were disillusioned with the institutions of the West, so they were yearning for something else to believe in, fresh perspectives from foreign lands, and broader forms of wisdom, all while Neptune was transiting the sign of the Guru. Sagittarius is all about belief, travel, and expansion. There was a shift from seeking answers in institutions to a desperate individual search for truth and meaning. Sagittarius takes things over the top, so the arts became more exaggerated. And since Sagittarius is also associated with propaganda as a mutable fire sign, drugs like cannabis underwent a massive propaganda phase, which resulted in fractured public perception. They were either romanticized as harmless fun,
"You want a hit?"
or demonized as criminal danger. And since Sagittarius is also the sign associated with stamina, this is also the period when we saw the emergence of the performance drug culture.
A lot of young people pushing weights, selling steroids, big business, big money.
Under Capricorn's influence, things get way more serious. The power suit. Capitalism worship. It's the rise of the yuppie. Capricorn is a sign ruled by Saturn, so there's more of a focus on detachment and street realism. It's anti-glamour. Spirituality gets institutionalized through seminars and certification programs. Cannabis enters its harshest era. We see the expansion of workplace drug testing, possession arrests surge, high-profile anti-drug campaigns, and mandatory minimum sentences.
Drug use extracts a high cost on America, the cost of lost productivity at the workplace.
Once Neptune entered into Aquarius, technology transitioned from being a novelty to fundamental to everyday life.
There has never been a better time to get online.
If you have a phone line, you can be online.
With Neptune in an air sign, there was a focus on communication and the explosion of the dot-com bubble. Television became anti-celebrity. Anyone could be the protagonist. We saw the alternative explosion. And since Aquarius is a human sign, collective guilt was felt over humanitarian issues. The use of torture post 9/11,
for the treatment of Al-Qaeda and Taliban prisoners interned at Guantanamo Bay,
that humanity had damaged the planet, and gay discrimination.
End. Don't ask, don't tell.
Cannabis enters its scientific phase, with public perception shifting towards the drug as a legitimate therapeutic substance for pain and chronic illness. Entirely new systems were created during this era for cultivation and distribution,
Medical marijuana card holders finally have a place to shop for relief,
which would later be the frameworks adapted for recreational legalization in the 2010s. And spirituality trends at this time become much more conceptual,
Law of attraction, they call it.
and less about religious dogma.
There's a stillness underneath the thoughts.
Once Neptune entered Pisces in 2011, its expression actually becomes much more straightforward, which is ironic for Pisces. Both Neptune and Pisces share the same symbolic terrain. Pisces reinforces Neptune's essential nature: empathy, compassion, altered states, addiction, spirituality. So let's look at Neptune's last passage through Pisces, the one before the era that we're ending now. A time so distant and unfamiliar that it was shocking to me how much this era echoed our own. Because Neptune and Pisces both relate to altered states, their combination tends to heighten the risk of addiction and also coincide with major turning points in how we relate to mind-altering substances. Ether was first publicly demonstrated in 1846 as a general anesthetic to render patients unconscious and insensitive to pain during surgical operations. By 1847, ether, along with chloroform, revolutionized surgery worldwide. What used to be a painful, severe procedure turned more into something like drifting in a dream, and surgery became a common medical practice due to these mind-altering substances. In 1853, the invention of the hypodermic needle made opium far more accessible and efficient as a medicine, but it also accelerated the addiction that led to the 19th century opioid crisis. Now, if we look at our Neptune and Pisces era, we can see similar themes of addiction with the fentanyl crisis, a wave that has become the deadliest drug epidemic in American history.
Every 36 hours, someone dies from a heroin or opioid drug overdose.
And in the 2010s, as prescription opioids were drastically restricted, the country saw one of its largest surges in injection drug use. There's also this recurring theme of rapid acceleration and acceptance of mind-altering substances in both eras. In 1853, chloroform became so accepted as an anesthetic for surgery that Queen Victoria used it in childbirth, which helped to give it mainstream legitimacy. This is similar to how modern celebrities in our era have helped to normalize psychedelics and ketamine therapy.
Ketamine is in the gray area when it comes to the church.
Ketamine is really helpful for really stubborn depression.
Nitrous oxide, originally used recreationally at laughing gas parties by the British upper class, transitioned to a medically sanctioned tool in dentistry once Neptune entered into Pisces. We see the same story happen with MDMA in our era. What was once a party drug is now transitioning to a respected PTSD therapy tool.
I was able to relax even when I was talking through probably my most traumatic memories.
And in general, our Neptune and Pisces era has helped reframe psychedelics as tools of healing and cognitive enhancement rather than dangerous and morally damning drugs.
Tiny doses of LSD give them the competitive edge they need.
Before 2011, they were still underground and stigmatized, and now tech entrepreneurs are openly microdosing. It's also during this 1850s transit that we first see cannabis sold in pharmacies in the US and UK for pain, insomnia, and menstrual cramps. And in 1854, the US dispensatory officially included cannabis indica as a medicine. We see a similar policy shift in our era with the Cole Memorandum, which opened the door for widespread state legalization and dramatically reduced stigma. So in general, with Neptune and Pisces, we see lowered stigma with psychoactive substances and the mainstreaming of what were previously fringe drugs, as well as massive addiction waves. The 1850s was an era when mass industrialization exposed women to exploitative working conditions, long hours, sexual harassment, and wage theft, which was the final catalyst which led to the beginning of the organized women's movement. We had the first organized women's rights convention, and literature throughout this period mirrored this collective uprising. The Scarlet Letter, published in 1850, tells the story of a woman publicly punished for adultery, only to transform from an outcast into a figure of strength and moral clarity. So this popular literature of the period was reflecting the era's debates about gender, punishment, and social redemption. When we look at our Neptune and Pisces era, we see a similar pattern of society coming to terms with the systemic abuse of women. In 2017, Alyssa Milano writes the tweet that ignited the Me Too movement, which likewise reignited questions around women's rights and systemic abuse. And the Amanda Knox trial. A young woman falsely accused of murder and overly sexualized by the media ignited debates around gender bias.
Why are people just letting this young woman be ripped to shreds?
She later hosted her own series, The Scarlet Letter Reports, a symbolic echo to the same themes explored in the previous Neptune and Pisces transit. In both eras, the collective was facing major reckonings in society's reception of the feminine, which makes sense as Neptune is the most yin or feminine planet, and we could say the same for Pisces as a sign. The artistic and social landscapes of this period were reflecting a collective desire to excavate our inner landscapes. Jane Eyre was a massively successful novel just as Neptune was entering Pisces in 1848. It was one of the first books to write from this perspective of the private consciousness, which was kind of revolutionary at the time. Fiction was not normally written from this perspective of the inner landscape. So we can see again how the cultural zeitgeist was helping to instill the agenda of transiting Neptune. We had a really similar resurgence in our era of this expansion of the inner landscape with the wave of trauma literacy. These words like triggered, gaslighting, toxic were not used before Neptune entered into Pisces in 2011. So during our Neptune and Pisces era, suddenly regular people started using the language of clinical professionals because Pisces motivates us towards this type of thoughtful introspection. And so these therapeutic frameworks suddenly became very attractive for what we were trying to explore. I can't not mention that Moby Dick was also published during this last Neptune and Pisces era because it's literally a book about a giant fish. One of the most important books of the 1850s era was Uncle Tom's Cabin. This was an anti-slavery novel that stirred a moral guilt in Northerners because it humanized enslaved people. So this book is considered to have been one of the final breaking points that contributed to the explosion of the abolitionist movement. For the first time, large numbers of white Americans were donating money to the movement, hiding fugitives, signing petitions, and risking arrest to support Black freedom. So back then, we saw this awakening through the abolitionist movement and the women's rights movement. In our era, we see a similar awakening through the Me Too movement and the Black Lives Matter movement. With Neptune in Pisces, compassion expanded to an unprecedented degree. And I think cultural moments we've seen, like the snowflake critique, emerged as reactions to this extreme.
The fundamental weakness of Western civilization is empathy.
The idea of being a colorblind society was completely abandoned somewhere around 2012-ish.
And finally, Neptune and Pisces both relate to mysticism. In March of 1848, the Fox sisters allegedly communicated with a spirit via rapping sounds, which created a media sensation. The 1850s saw the explosion of the spiritualist movement. Mediums offering seances, table tilting, and trance rituals were attended by millions across the country.
Just begin by taking a big, deep breath.
We've witnessed a similar surge in our own era through meditation apps, astrology platforms, witch talk, and manifestation culture. The Seance Circle and the TikTok For You page are both portals into a trance state. In general, in our era, we've seen the explosion of content creators and people who curate the ideal reality online. The echo chambers which the algorithms create confirm our fears and our assumptions. thus creating delusional realities. The algorithm really has become this entity that seduces us into its trance, and not only does it capture our attention, but it also is training us how to create. It teaches us to follow its rules of metrics if we want our art to succeed, which narrows our self-expression and subverts our own instincts. But I think people are growing tired of these rules. With Neptune's ingress into Aries, there could be a collective break from this obedience to the algorithm and our need to follow these rules of performance. Neptune in Aries might inspire us to create on our own terms, guided by personal autonomy rather than predictive metrics. So now that we have a clearer sense of this era that we're just finishing, what can we expect from this new era of Neptune transiting Aries? One that we haven't seen since the early 1870s. Aries is about striking out on our own, testing ourselves through direct action, and proving our strength against untamed conditions. The Civil War started the very moment Neptune ingressed into Aries in 1861, which instantly influenced the people of this period with this collective vision of self-determination. The Homestead Act, passed in 1862, allowed any citizen to claim 160 acres of public land for free, under one condition: you had to live on it, build a home, and farm it for 5 years. After that, the land became yours permanently. It was designed to encourage westward expansion and settlement, but it also created this collective idolizing of self-determination. The ordinary person was inspired to take their destiny into their own hands and prove what they're capable of. With Neptune in Aries, the guiding ideal transitioned towards one of self-reliance. So Neptune actually already dipped into Aries this summer. It entered on March 20th and stayed until October 22nd, until it retrograded back into Pisces for one final stretch. And during just those few months in Aries, we already saw a symbolic echo of its last transit: the sudden appearance of a TV show called Back to the Frontier, a modern return to this homestead era mythos.
This is 10 times harder than I ever could imagine.
We see the actual freeing of the slaves come into fruition with the passing of the 13th Amendment in 1865, something that was only dreamed of during the previous Neptune and Pisces transit. We also see the first pedal-powered bicycles appear during this Neptune and Aries era, which sparked the bicycle craze of the 1860s. For the first time, people had an affordable means of transportation that was entirely self-sufficient. If you imagine being alive in this moment with people granted freedoms they had never known, you can see how these themes of personal autonomy would have so completely captivated the public imagination. So with Neptune's return to Aries, we might expect a yearning towards more personal autonomy. With the rapid expansion of AI, the opportunities we used to have to prove our strengths might no longer be there.
I mean, there are some people who are clearly using ChatGPT not to think.
So the personal struggle of accomplishing something on your own could be what we end up longing for with Neptune and Aries. Yet the opposite outcome is equally possible. Neptune's ingress into Aries could also bring new pathways to freedom, particularly when this technology creates more accessibility and supports society by returning our time, our agency, and our self-direction. When we turn to art, the early 1860s were the beginnings of the Impressionist movement. Impressionism violated the rules of academic painting by using broken brushstrokes, which made the paintings feel unfinished instead of highly polished. So art was influenced by the Aries approach of a more immediate and direct expression. So this new era could bring us novel pathways in the way that we find and feed inspiration. Some of the major works of this era were Tolstoy's War and Peace, Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. There's an obvious Aries theme here. And we also get Charles Dickens' Great Expectations, a story about a boy who is ashamed of where he comes from, only to realize his true worth comes from his mastery of his own path, not his class status. I think there is a really wonderful Aries lesson in all of these. So while Neptune and Pisces brought us developments in the arts focused on exploring our internal landscapes, Neptune in Aries is likely to interest us in the self and a renewed fascination with themes of war and conflict. After the swift adoption of the hypodermic needle under Neptune and Pisces, morphine became a staple on the battlefield once Neptune entered Aries. Wounded soldiers were routinely treated with this new technology, and many developed addictions, later called soldier's disease. So Neptune and Aries fuse drug use with environments of war, injury, and combat. In the upcoming Neptune and Aries era, we might expect similar themes of altered states of consciousness within these environments of war and conflict. The Salvation Army is a religious charity and service organization that was created in 1865 to fight poverty, addiction, and spiritual hopelessness. They actually modeled themselves after the military because it helped them stay organized and disciplined while doing work on the streets. It's so Aries Neptune to see a religious organization that's centered around sacrifice and service explicitly modeled after a military hierarchy. They literally saw their service to the people as a war against the enemies of poverty and addiction. So I don't know if this means that in our era, religious organizations will be taking on more militant frameworks, but this is definitely where things start to get a little Handmaid's Tale. But we have to remember that the last Neptune in Aries transit was during the Civil War, and back then, military identity and religious belief were much more closely intertwined. Abraham Lincoln himself suggested the war might be God's punishment for the sin of slavery, and the Confederacy thought of their side as a holy defense of God's natural order. And this fusion of faith and religion informing warfare is obviously very common throughout history, but the Civil War stands out in that the conflict itself was a single moral question, the legitimacy of slavery itself. So Neptune, which is a planet totally concerned with unification, enters into Aries, and on that very day, a war breaks out that really was centered around a question of unification versus separateness. Regardless, our Neptune in Aries era is bound to look much different than it did back then, but this is also a cycle that our collective is due to face every 163 years. After the Civil War ended, the collective was grappling with the sorrow and the guilt that came from so many lives lost. Communities erected monuments to their fallen sons and began the practice of decorating their graves, a tradition known at the time as Decoration Day, but it would later be renamed as Memorial Day. So Memorial Day as a US holiday can be understood as an expression of the last Neptune in Aries transit, a collective response to the guilt and grief that follow war, but also a mythologizing of those who stepped forward. So in our Neptune in Aries era, we're likely to encounter the same impulse again, a heightened tendency for the collective to elevate or sanctify those who act, risk, or step forward. So as we've seen, the way Neptune manifests shifts dramatically based on the sign that it's transiting. We're moving away from the feminine influence of Pisces, an environment that allows Neptune's influence to spill past the point of containment. Now, the fate of all that Neptune governs is to be initiated in the masculine environment of Aries. Here, Neptune inspires through sharp ignition, the idolizing of brave action. We can expect inspiration to take the form of new freedoms. Self-reliance will become a virtue worth romanticizing, the glorification of the hero, and spiritual principle as a worthy site of conflict. 2026 marks a major collective turning point. Beyond Neptune ingressing into a new sign, Uranus is also entering a new sign, amidst its own 84-year cycle, where it will form a trine with a newly ingressed Pluto in Aquarius. These outer planets are all arbiters of change on the collective level. And since they are all changing, that means that we are all changing, as you might have gathered from this video. But what mutations will this new ecosystem create? What strange new fantasies will emerge? Who will we become in this new era of Neptune in Aries?